It's good to be up here. I guess I'll just do my small introduction. It's not going to be really applicable to YouTube or whatever anyway. But it's super fun to get to come up here and preach to you guys. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to do so. Typically, as I like to do, I like to give sermons that are, I don't know, more fun, I guess, to me. Typically, I guess the sermons that are interesting to me, though, are the nerd ones. So I guess my favorite memories of preaching when I was a child were a lot of sermons about, like, how science is incorporated into the Bible. I'm not really a big fan of, like, the science bashing stuff. I mean, I'm not saying a lot of people are wrong, like, oh, science, evolution versus Christianity and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they have their places, I guess. But today's lesson is more on the unification of science in the Bible. Instead of just saying, oh, science is trash, they get everything wrong, they have no idea what they're talking about. It's more like science eventually comes to the acknowledgement of God without specifically acknowledging God. Science typically will come to an understanding of the world and of the things around us, but it's only several hundred to even thousands of years after God has already said this is the way it is. So I just thought it'd be fun and fascinating to take a look at some examples in the Bible of things that the Bible has already told us were true facts, but as science is limited, right, we weren't able to swim to the depths of the oceans. We weren't able to climb to the highest peaks at that point in time to prove the things that God had said were true, but now in such a technological age, we are able to actually prove the exact wordings and the exact foretellings that the Bible has told us. I don't know how good this is going to look, because I'm going to have to keep... I don't usually do paper outlines, so I'm not going to look here. I'm going to be like looking at my own screen, I guess, but that's just kind of how I roll. So the first topic I want to talk about for, again, this kind of unification of science in the Bible is talking about an underground ocean. In 1977, scientists first discovered hydrothermal vents while exploring an oceanic spreading ridge near the Galapagos Islands. So just recently, in 1977, scientists were able to discover that what we're saying by hydrothermal vents is we're saying that scientists discovered water pumping into the ocean from under the ocean. And then you got to think, well, how can that be? The ocean is the floor, right? We determine land level by like elevation and stuff. How much are we above the ocean? We all know the ocean goes down, but then once you hit the floor of the ocean, what's below that? Well, it's like earth and crust and then a whole bunch of other, like, the core of the earth and whatever, but there's no more water underneath it, right? I mean, it doesn't really make any sense. So, but yet we find these vents that are pumping water out into the ocean from the bottom of the ocean. In 2014, scientists discovered a liquid rock substance some 400 miles below the Earth's surface. It's believed that the current amount of known water could fill our oceans 3 times over. So just in 2014, what happened was there was some kind of volcanic eruption. I didn't document where this rock was found, or I can't remember exactly how or what area it was found, but it was in an area with volcanic activity. And volcanic activity is, the Earth being liquefied, obviously, right? And then it's eventually coming up. I'm not a scientist. I'm not claiming to be. It's just stuff I studied specifically. But, volcanic activity is rock that's melted from the bottom of the Earth's crust or whatever, and then it's being spewed up and out. Well, eventually, after, whatever amount of time it took, some weird rock that scientists had never seen came to the surface and was spewed out by a volcano. And this rock is different than anything they've ever seen. They're calling it ringwoodite. I don't know where they come up with these names. But the idea of this rock is that it's a solid, it's a rock, but at the same time, it's porous enough that it can contain a quantity of water. It's almost like a rock sponge or something, some kind of very porous rock that's able to actually maintain or have water inside of it. So because of this rock, they've now theorized that, obviously no one's been 400 miles below the Earth's crust, that there's actually another layer. So basically what we have is the ocean up above, and sorry this is really tiny for you guys, but I like this picture the most. But now it's ocean, we have upper mantle, we have transition zone, which is now what's been discovered, and then it goes into lower mantle, and then outer core, inner core, whatever, and then the core, which is made up of iron of the earth. So we have a transition zone, and inside of this transition zone is this porous rock that's actually holding water. Absurdly large amounts of water, like just absurd. Again, if this water could somehow be brought to the surface of the earth, then we could fill our own oceans 3 times over. Or if all this water was brought to the surface all at once, it would flood the world. So, if you turn with me to our first verse that we'll look at, it would be coming from, I gotta use my phone, I apologize, I didn't pack my Bible since I traveled over here. So, Genesis chapter 7 and verse 11. Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 reads, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, the 17th day of the month, on that day all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heavens were opened." So, long have we always talked about how we don't really understand what we're talking about, the fountains of the deep. Like, what is this referring to? Well, somehow, we talk about like aquifers. It's kind of almost like the thing I've always heard growing up. It's like this idea of like, underground water, aquifers and things of that nature. But all of those water sources, even though they're like on a land mass and they're underneath the ground, they're still like ocean level. They're not way down here in this transition zone. So I guess my new understanding of what possibly took place during the Great Flood is that, still miraculously, I'm not taking anything away from God and the amazingness. I mean, obviously the heavens were open too. God caused it to rain immensely, but he also somehow opened the fountains of the deep, is what it says. He literally opened up like underground water pumps and let the water pour in, assumably, right? Because I don't know, but assumably from this transition zone. He actually pumped water. He allowed this water, maybe like through tectonic plate and earth activity and stuff, right? As it shifts and moves and squishes and crushes. If the 2 layers were to squish down, then it would just shoot the water up because it has to go somewhere, right? And so it just almost instantaneously, right, within a matter of a couple days, 40 days, the entire earth could be completely flooded. Again, because of that massive amount of water. Job talks about this exact same water occurrence in Job chapter 38 and verse 16, which then reads, "Have you entered the springs of the sea, or have you walked in search of the depths?" So he's referring to is kind of this conversation between God and Job, and God saying, "Are you able to do this? Are you able to do that? Are you able to see this?" And obviously the answer over and over and over and over again is no, because they had no ability to see or to do any of these things that God keeps saying that, but God can, right? God can see these things. God knows what's happening. And he asks Job, "Have you entered the springs of the sea?" Well, again, it's like, what is he talking about? What is a spring of the sea, right? A spring, a water-giving source of the sea. But the sea is the water source. When you really think about it, right? To our infinite knowledge, we go, well, the sea is the water source. No, there's a water source that feeds into the sea, the spring of the sea. And that's what this picture is. These are called chimneys. This is the ocean floor, and there's some light being cast on it. So scientific term, they call it a chimney. And it's minerals that are being deposited and just can't keep, like stalagmites and stalactites kind of a thing. But as water is pouring from underneath the ocean. So this is ocean floor. Water is somehow below the ocean floor, and it's pumping up. And the white stuff is, it depends on what water mass is being pumped. They say that this is specifically like silica and other minerals, which is what makes it look white. It looks like it's smoking, but it's not smoking. It's a combination of like air bubbles, but it's also minerals and stuff. And as the minerals get spewed up and out, it's creating this formation of like rock and mineral and things of that nature. So this is water, though, again, spewing into the ocean from the bottom of the ocean. So there you have it. Super fascinating. I think it's pretty cool. So another quick thought is that for many years, like an absurd amount of years, all the way up until, Middle Ages, like 1500s, man had believed that the earth was flat. As a caveat, I've found that there were philosophers as early as 3 to 400 AD who did theorize that the earth was round. But it wasn't like a commonly accepted thing. But there were people talking about it like, hey, you know what, I think this earth might actually be round. But the majority, I like this picture because I thought this would be like, the concept if the earth was flat. Like it'd be this kind of like disc, and then the oceans just kind of pour off to the sides, into outer space kind of a thing. But we have this protection of a ecodome. I don't know, it's like pretty much the only way that it could happen, I guess, if we truly did have a flat earth. But in Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 22, it says, "It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain and spreads them out like a tent to dwell in." So even though it's kind of like this, from what I've read, it's like this back of your mind kind of thinking that a lot of people thought that the earth, by like 1500, we'll say, maybe half the people thought the earth was flat and half the people thought the earth was round. But at the same time, even if you thought, okay, sure, the earth is round and it's not flat, then they'd be, okay, well then prove that you're not scared and go sailing out into the ocean and see how far you can get until you fall off the earth. And then they're just like, I'm okay, I'm pretty sure it's round, but like nobody wants to take that chance of falling off the edge of the earth because it was kind of like this daunting idea until, getting about mid-century when people really started vastly exploring the ocean and hopping continents and things of that nature. Then they realized, we're not falling off the edge of the earth, obviously, and they were able to report back. So just something, again, I just kind of like tidbits. This is like little mini sections on science and true facts of the Bible that I just took more recently to find out that these things were truly true. In Genesis chapter 2 and verse 7, and in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 19, I won't take the time to read it right now, because I think it's pretty well known that we were made from the dust of the earth, right? When God created man, he says that you were formed from the dust of the earth. And again, this is reiterated in chapter 3 and verse 19. But again, we kind of think to ourselves, well, what do you mean by we're made of the dust of the earth? Like, in a literal sense, right, God can make anything out of anything, right? God could be like, well, you're made out of the snow. You're made out of rocks. Or you're made out of whatever, right? Because God could take a lump of snow and then turn it into a man, right? He can take any object and any material in the world and physically turn it into whatever he wants, because he doesn't follow the laws of physics, like, where like something has to be created from something. He can create something from nothing. He doesn't have to follow laws of physics where it says that, like whatever I take here has the same, even if I remold it and redo things to it or fire it or freeze it or whatever, it still has the same chemical properties as the thing I started with, right? But in a very literal sense, God did make man out of earth. And we kind of get that basic idea, not like the scientific-y kind of explanation. We get the basic idea in the sense that, well, I know that when I die, we go look at mummies or whatever, right? And you open up their tombs and they turn to dust. Like they're like literally dust after like 2,000 years or something. They just kind of like disintegrate and just turn into like a fine powder, right? So turns out this top table is the table of what human beings are made of. It's kind of this weird little chart thing, but we're made of 65% of our bodies are made of oxygen, 18% is carbon, 10% is hydrogen, 3% is nitrogen, and then the rest of our bodies, like our physical beings, right, flesh and blood and bone and whatnot, is made up of these elements. The rest are trace elements that are less than 1% of our body. Things like chromium, cobalt, copper, fluoride, iodine, magnesium, whatever, right? We're literally a composition. Our souls, obviously, is what God put in us, which cannot be quantified and cannot be measured and is not a physical substance, it's a spiritual substance. But our physical bodies are made up of these elements. SOM stands for soil organic matter. So when you take the true essence of Earth, right, whatever, because, obviously, depending on where you grab the Earth again, if I take a scoop of dirt from here and I take a scoop of dirt from Utah, it's going to have different chemical properties as far as the percentages and things of that nature, because like different rock formation, different volcanic activity, which has different mineral deposits, so it might be heavier in certain minerals and less in certain areas. Okay, so all that aside, the base idea is that soil organic matter is made up of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur, and that's like 99% of what dirt is, which is like over 99% of what humans are. So in a very literal scientific sense, we are actually dirt. Like, we are literally made up of dirt. But because of, the way our bodies function with the blood flow and everything, so we don't feel like dirt, we don't look like dirt, we don't smell like dirt. But very literally, once our soul goes to heaven and our bodies die and we begin to decompose, once we're fully decomposed and all the oxygen and the carbons, the liquids, obviously the water and stuff that we're mainly water too, just leave our body and evaporates, all you're left with is dust, which is basically just the very essence of dirt. So, enter in Matthew Fontaine Maury, the sexy guy. I couldn't go a single lesson without having like a weird picture of some guy from my Simon and Garfunkel collection. So this guy's name is Matthew Fontaine Maury. And in the mid to late 1800s, this guy became the head of the U.S. Navy's Department of Charts and Instruments, only to discover that the Navy had very few charts of the ocean. Even all the way up until the 1800s, though people understood like the map of the Earth. I mean, we kind of got that by the 1800s. We had a basic idea of the outline of the continents and where we can sail and where we couldn't. We really didn't know much about the ocean. Like, how do you graph the ocean? We couldn't dive down into the ocean still at this point. We didn't have advanced submarines or exploratory ocean drones and stuff that they do now. So he set out to try to understand the ocean more for the sake of his job, which was the charts man for the Navy. So he ends up getting the nickname Pathfinder of the Sea because, among several other things, he actually had several discoveries in helping to chart the ocean, to chart how the ocean works. But one thing that he's kind of known for is he actually took boats out into the ocean in multiple places, and he just threw bottles, and he wrote down the exact coordinates of where he threw the bottle off of the ocean, into the ocean. So he'd go different places all over the ocean. He's just chucking bottles, and then he had people go and find the bottles. And then he's like, okay, this got thrown from coordinate X, Y, whatever, and then they found it off the coast of whatever. And then bottle had coordinates X, Y, whatever, and then it was found off the coast of whatever, right? And so he just kept doing this over and over and over again. And I don't know why. I really should have put it in a chart. It's kind of an interesting, his very first chart, and he graphed the currents of the ocean. Well, again, no one had the concept of a current in an ocean. An ocean is an ocean. It doesn't move anywhere. It's just a giant body of water. It sits there. But turns out it does actually have a current. There is a current to the ocean. And this comes from Psalms chapter 8. I have no idea why I closed my app. Psalms chapter 8. We'll read verses 6 through 8. It says, "You have made him to have dominion over the works of your hands, and put all things under his feet, all sheep and oxen, even the beasts of the field, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea, that pass through the paths of the seas. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is your name in all the earth." So it's almost like this small as a matter of fact line, right? And all those fish that are in the sea, that swim in the paths of the sea. And it's like, what are you talking about? I mean, honestly, when you're, and that time is kind of one of those, I mean, honestly, you can almost imagine people in that era, maybe, 1,000 years ago, and they're studying the Bible, and they go, well, we don't really get the paths of the sea, but God's ways are higher than our ways. We have really no idea what he's talking about. Because it wasn't truly discovered until the mid-1800s, where we realized that there are paths of the sea, and this guy got nicknamed Pathfinder of the Sea, just by simply being able to explore the ocean, throw bottles, find out that wherever we found the bottles, okay, well, we dropped it here, and the bottle ended up on this coast, then the current's flowing this way. And he charted it all. He charted a vast majority of the oceans and the paths that if you were to, again, just sit in a raft at this point, you will eventually go to this continent. Or if you were to sit in a raft right at this point, you'll eventually float to this continent. Why? Because the ocean actually has a current to it that will take you to specific places. So, again, I find that quite fascinating. Let's go ahead and read Acts 17, verse 26, and then we'll get into what we're getting at, kind of in reverse order for this one. So, Acts, what am I doing here? Acts chapter 17 and verse 26. It says, "And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on all the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings." I like this verse more than just reading a verse that, yeah, Adam and Eve existed and God created Adam and Eve. I mean, I think that's super simplistic. You know, I know we get it. I'm not trying to take away the fact that it's still a true statement that God did create Adam and Eve. And then from Adam and Eve, all nations were formed. But then it's reiterated in Acts chapter 17 where he specifically says, and he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth. We all came from one blood. Okay, again, if you didn't have the science of genomes and DNA and whatever, then it's like, okay, cool, one blood, that makes sense, right? We're from Adam and Eve. I mean, right? So what's one blood? It's one nation, right? Well, in 2007, researchers confirmed the theory that all modern humans descended from the same small group of people. So again, science, I'm not going to say all, because there's a lot of well-meaning and very faithful Christian scientists. There are people who, there's even some talk that like Isaac Newton and stuff, they say he was actually a first century Christian. And the reason he discovered gravity and things of that nature is because there were some verses, I didn't go into this at all, but there are verses that lent to the idea of gravity and things of that nature. And he actually lent on the Bible to go, if this is true, then I want to prove it. I want to figure it out for myself. So there are tons of scientists that actually use the Bible to help them in figuring out their scientific discoveries. You know, it'd be the same if Matthew Maury read this book. He says, paths of the sea. Is that true? Is there really paths? Let's test it. Let's see if I can prove there's a path of the sea. So anyway, researchers finally proved that turns out we are all from this small group of people, right? Well, of course, what they're not coming to grasp to terms with in this article is, it's very obvious from the articles I read on these that they were not like believing in the Adam and Eve idea. It's like the evolution thing. But then it's like, okay, but yeah, I think we are from like one pool of Homo sapien, whatever, cavemen from 10 million years ago, that kind of stuff. So I have this one quote from this one article. I try to condense it down. This is, although each team collected and analyzed genomes independently, they came to the same general conclusion, that genetics similarities between peoples of Eurasia, Oceania, and the Americas indicate that all non-Africans descend from a small population that left Africa roughly 60,000 years ago, right? Whatever. So basically, what they're trying to say, without them saying it, but they've proven it, is that we all descended from Adam and Eve. Is really what they were able to finally prove. Is that what they did is they had several different scientific teams, and they collected blood samples from every single race. Like they went like to the four corners of the earth, and they just collected blood samples from everyone. And they found out that every single person that they collected blood from, regardless of their lineage and regardless of the place that they were currently at in the world, they all had a common genome with Africans. Like basically we're all at least 0.05% African or 0.1% African or something, right? All that matters is that in some small way, we all are part African, okay? So the current scientific theory is that we all came from Africa. Like that's like kind of where the Big Bang happened, and then the fish turned into the human and the blah blah and the monkeys and the whatever, right? So it all started in Africa to them. And that's where the first Homo sapien man cave thing happened. It all began in Africa. But I mean, realistically, what they're just proving is that if we all have something similar in our DNA to the exact same bloodline, then all that means is we all in some way have descended from the exact same beginning bloodline. Though it's been diluted and changed throughout time because, you know, interracial stuff, and then probably like the Tower of Babel, you know, when God changed everybody's languages and everything like that, we kind of all went our separate ways. It's very possible. I mean, it doesn't go into specifics, but there's nothing to say that God didn't change the blood types at the same time too. But anyway, long story short, we've all descended from a common bloodline, and that common bloodline is then Adam and Eve. Let's read Jeremiah 33:22. This will be our last point. Jeremiah chapter 33 and verse 22. It says, "As the host of heaven cannot be numbered, nor the sand of the sea measured, so will I multiply the descendants of David my servant, and the Levites who ministered to me." Some other translations, depending on what Bible you have, it says, "as the host of heaven." So it's referring to the stars of heaven. It's referring just the stars in the sky. They cannot be numbered. It's impossible to count the number of stars in the sky. So then we have this, don't tell me what to do, because science has to count them. Like, we have to. Like, the second we're told we can't do something, we have to try like 1,000 times over. So early astronomers, as early as like early Middle Ages or even before then, and Galileo and all those great philosophers, right? There's not a guy named, I read him quite a bit, Kepler? Something Kepler, I can't remember, Johann Kepler? Anyway, really famous astronomers from the early ages, and they all had to count the stars, right? So they're counting them, they're like, don't tell me what to do, I can count these things. Like, you turn the lights off, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. They sit out there all night long, and some of them said they got exact numbers, some of them just kind of an estimate, but it's very obvious we could count them if we had the ability, but it's just kind of hard with your eyes and stuff. But like, yeah, we can count them, right? It's about 3,000 to 5,000 stars is what you can see in the night sky. Like if you just turn the lights off and you were able to sit there and count as the Earth turned, you're able to count every star you could see and somehow get around the Earth, you could count about 3,000 to 5,000 stars. That's like pretty normal. Galileo, he lived 1564 to 1642. He ended up coming up with a homemade telescope, and his little homemade, very weak sauce telescope at the time, because it was the first one invented. When he was able to look into the sky with the very first telescope that he invented, he saw a minimum of like a 10-fold increase in stars. He's like, oh wow, like we were so far off. But surely this is it, right? Surely this is as good as we can get. I mean, it's probably just these tens of thousands now, maybe roughly 10,000 or more. But yeah, this has got to be about it. Well, more recently, I guess enter the common century. So there are about 10 billion galaxies in the observable universe. The number of stars in the galaxy varies, but assuming an average of 100 billion stars per galaxy, that means that there are about, whatever that's 1 billion trillion stars in the observable universe. And notice that I underlined observable, because even from the articles I read, scientists are more than happy to admit that this is an estimation, right? So it's obviously not even still an exact counting of the stars. But currently, with the best technology that we have come up with, the best telescopes that we have, we estimate from what we've seen maybe about 10 billion galaxies, and then they each have roughly 1 billion stars. So that gives you 1 billion trillion stars, and that's only what we can currently see. I mean, think about like Galileo back in the day. Oh, we can only see 3,000 stars, so that's all there is that exists. You get a telescope. Oh, actually there's like 10,000 stars. And then a couple of years later, they get a better telescope. Well, actually there's probably more like 1 billion stars. And then a couple of years later, they get a telescope where they can see multiple like mini universes or what a galaxy is away. And then you're going, okay, actually there's probably like tens of billions. Okay, now there's trillions of billions. And that's just where we're at right now. I mean, like 50 years from now, we can discover another universe or galaxy inside of a galaxy, and then this goes, oh no, observable universe is at least add another like 20 zeros onto that. And so again, long story short is the universe is absurdly big, and there is 100% no way you will ever count the stars. Like, you just won't. It's not possible, even if you had the best telescopes, and you could physically see every star, which we still don't think we can see every physical star yet. But even if you could, there's no way you'd have the time to be able to count them all. Even if you could physically see them, but we still can't physically see them. So all of this, just to give a lesson on simply wow, it's amazing, the Bible, I guess, the God and His creation, what He has told us, what He has let us see, and what He has foretold us about how the earth is, and what is to happen, and the things that make the earth, right? The way it functions and things. He lends these ideas to us without going into great scientific detail, because it's not necessary, but it's, I think, genuinely fascinating that these things can now be scientifically proven to a point where we can go, oh yeah, God actually knew what He was talking about. Like, turns out He's completely right. And I mean, we all knew that all along, but it's just kind of I don't know, it's fun when your faith can be realized, when it can be more, instead of faith and zero visibility of, well, yeah, I'm assuming there's a path to the sea, I have no idea what He's talking about, though. To know that, oh, there really is, and that's what He was talking about, and have more of a tangible grasp on, yeah, God is right, and we all know that to begin with. That's why we're here and we're Christians and we're baptized, because we all believe God. But to have that tangible grasp on, yeah, like, wow, okay, so that's what He was getting at. I just think it kind of like brings it full circle. So I know this wasn't a lesson on baptism or becoming a Christian or anything of that nature. I'm more of the person who like to share the facts and the the fun things, but that invitation is still left open if for any need. Anybody needs to make their wants and wishes known, if they want to repent of any sins that have been made in a public nature, or you'd like to pray along with you for anything that you have need of, just come forward as we stand and sing the invitation song.